Hello everybody, thank you for joining us on News from the Heart. I'm Heather George and I have the honor and privilege of talking with my teacher, my guru, Swami Chetanananda. Thank you, Swamiji, for joining us and sharing everything that you do.
Happy to be with you, dear.
So maybe a little bit of a personal question, as I have this opportunity to talk with you all the time that has moved through my life, and yet I see, after living in this community and developing a deep daily practice, which I've always had a practice and love, but getting to live in a community of people that are really dedicated to that, I've been fascinated with seeing how different people manage their relationships differently while maintaining a practice. And I think it was one of the first questions I talked with you about, and I've certainly heard you speak about it from a whole lot of different angles. But today, my main thought of conversation and interest was to hear how you see relationships coming in and out of people's lives and having some type of consistency with their spiritual practice. Do they affect each other? Is it important to draw boundaries? Has your spiritual practice changed because of relationships, and how do we navigate that balance in our lives?
Spiritual growth requires commitment. And very simply, you're either committed or you're not. There's little flexibility with that. And relationships are an essential aspect of every human life. We're essentially a social being, and the evolutionary advantage of humans has always been their capacity to cooperate with one another. You know, our very high level of language development is a demonstration of the significance of cooperation in our lives and in our success as an organism on this planet. Being myself and being with others, understanding myself really, being anchored in my own energetic mechanism and capable of extending that awareness to the energetic mechanisms of others, informs us that all of the motion, all of the activity manifesting itself, you know, first as the life of the earth, and then the individual organisms that express the life of the earth, all of this is of one source.
So do you separate spiritual practice and those
relationships are a part of spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Navigating, you know, our personal lives with people and our, you know, by degree, rather impersonal life with our culture and society, you know, all essential aspects of spiritual growth, which are not to be denied. Further, you know, personal and intimate relationships, you know, are a source of, can be a source of inspiration, can be a source of personal nourishment, personal support, when there is an appropriate commitment on the part of the individual towards spiritual growth and the effort to develop one's understanding of how, you know, taking care of yourself and serving others is essentially two sides of a singular activity that is expressed as growth. And when I say growth, you know that I have said many times, the sole reason, there is only one reason all living beings are in this world. You know, the whole sort of inspiration behind everything that is going on Earth, from the simplest to the most complex organism, you know, is an expression of the wish to grow. The ultimate reality has the urge to create, and in that creating to discover itself. And we are, each of us, an expression of that urge to create, and we too fully participate in that urge and discover ourselves in that process. So, relationships. You know, every day, Heather, I go to sleep at night. Every night I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning understanding that as I have slept, the entire world has changed. And I wake up knowing that this entire world and every aspect of it, you know, then a funny thing is, living in a community like this, you know, basically nothing is ever in the same place one day that it was the day before. You know, you want to try to find a dustpan, you wake up every morning, or a broom, you know, or a dish towel, you know, or the on switch for the dishwasher. Every day you wake up and something is not where it was before. It's all chaos. But I wake up every morning, and the first thing I remind myself is I am in this world to grow. And what am I in this world to grow? Essentially, we can think of it as I am in this world to grow love. And each of our loving relationships, because of this chaos that is, you know, the essence of the world, you know, another way we can say it is there is only one constant in the universe, and that is change. Because of this constant change, you know, our relationships, and especially our close personal and intimate relationships, need to be renegotiated on a regular basis. And we have to understand that, you know, relationship is a constant negotiation. And when it is a constant negotiation between two people who are committed to growing love, then there is an appreciation both of the benefits of closeness and the responsibility that we have for caring for ourselves and one another by allowing the appropriate and necessary space.
And change dynamics.
And, you know, while there are lots of reasons why an intimate relationship may have to go by the wayside, as far as I'm concerned, there is never a reason why, you know, we should break a close connection that we have experienced and cultivated that has benefited our lives. I think this idea that we have in the United States, especially, that we run away from loved ones because they have, you know, taken a step within themselves and in their life that in some way creates some artificial sense of distance, you know, is completely inappropriate to our development.
I don't know how, it's so relevant to me, that statement, and I've always said, once I love somebody, whatever our relationship is, I love you. And I've had so many people come in and out of my life, and there's a level of wreaking havoc when endings happen and then they can't ever talk to you again or cut themselves off. I don't know. I mean, like, I love, maybe to stay on topic, it's all part of my growth. So if that's happening, I can use that.
It is all part of your growth.
But I agree with what you're saying.
And, you know, if in fact we exist in an environment that at its core is an expression of one creative energy, one impulse, then the idea of burning bridges between loved ones is a completely inappropriate and erroneous idea. And whatever mistakes we make, and every human being in growing makes mistakes. Whatever mistakes we make, whatever, strokes we want to place on the canvas of our own life that might displease some other, the other who is displeased, should have the sense of personal responsibility in the circumstance to rise above their displeasure and see in, everybody's creative expression the work of the divine. And in seeing that, have respect for one another and concern for one another and an enduring commitment to connection with one another. Because non-duality is realized through, in the social, personal, and intimate, dimensions of our experience through loyalty and enduring connectedness. So I think, our tensions about what our loved ones are up to is really an expression of an attachment that that we have, a tension that we have that it's necessary for us to rise above. Yeah. It's necessary for us to understand that there is a business dimension of our relationships with each other, which we may or may not, be able to negotiate a satisfactory balance in. There is that possibility. But, energetically, spiritually, it is necessary that once we find a loving contact with another human being, then that human being, that circumstance requires our respect. It's really, in a way, not about the person. It's not. I'm not concerned about, who anybody else is in my relationships with them. I'm concerned about who I am. And I think, really and truly, if we're spiritual people, we sustain loving relationships, and the ebb and flow of the energy. There, no relationship is like ever in perfect balance. There is never a perfect distribution of resources one to the other. But in loving relationships, that imbalance, is sustained and is ever changing, and the state of the dynamic state of imbalance is sustained because it supports two people in the realization of one experience, which is unconditional. And that means unconditional love.
Wow, you just made relationships, which are the most complicated thing in the universe, sound so simple, Swamiji.
It's not that complicated. I think the fact is that if you are committed to your own practice, then you are working on contact, alignment, and flow with every human being that you interact with in your life, certainly with yourself and with every human being you interact with in your life. And that contact, alignment, and flow expresses itself as releasing tensions and allowing the creative energy to move. So then, our intimate and personal relationships, will, by the very nature of love, look, we open our hearts to somebody and we love them. What happens? They change. They change because the love in our hearts coming into their life, automatically changes them, and it brings us into a different state of relationship with one another. And certainly in America, and you know, whether liberal, conservative, you know, conservatives don't even think about this. They have a bunch of rules they live by. Of course, the rules are all about suppress and deny. It's making them sick in the head, sick in the heart, it's killing them. But the people who say they care, you know, actually what happens is when another person changes, we love them, they change, we get pissed and throw them out. This is moronic. So if you choose to open your heart to someone, and really, in fact, a lot of the times we don't have a choice. Our heart makes it for us. It just flies open, and we leap into circumstances we have no idea what the you know, effects of will be, the consequences will be. But you know, if we're a stand-up person, then when our heart has taken us to a place that is delicate and fragile, you know, we remember the extraordinary power and resilience of love, and we stay connected to that, in that love, holding that space through every storm and every chaos and every change that is really the natural environment in which we exist in the first place.
You brought something up when you mentioned whether it be conservatives or certain people who have a harder time opening their heart or having a lot of rules around relationships. It made me think of, for some reason, a Buddhist monk or a nun or someone who chooses to not have relationships in their life to pursue their spiritual path. Is that,
well, I mean,
that similar to all those rules?
First of all, you know, the Buddhists had the idea, and in early Hinduism there was the idea that all human interaction is the source of suffering. The nirvana is, in fact, you know, finding a place deeply enough within yourself that you can just exclude other human beings from your existence forever.
What do you think about that?
I think it doesn't work.
It's not nature, is it?
I think it doesn't have, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about it, but we don't have time. There are lots of monks, lots of people who take monk initiations and nun initiations. Very, very few of those monks and nuns ever stay celibate or disconnected from people, though this was in fact the Buddhist ideal. You know, the reality of our human life is growing requires contact. Growing requires human contact and human nourishment. Each of us, each of us requires that in our lives. Let's acknowledge it. You know, in a completely creative environment, which is in fact the way our world is, there are no rules. There are suggestions. And I will say this. You know, our environment is much more complex and sophisticated than we understand, and there are lots more behavioral influences in our environment than we are able to comprehend. So the rules originally, I believe, were strong suggestions that were intended to help human beings maintain their personal integrity as they move through a world in which there were lots of influences, especially as you start to open yourself up energetically. You know, you are moving in a world that is full of influences that you are unaware of and probably don't comprehend. So I am not against rules until the rules become a constraint upon the person's growth. Because what we're really in the world to do is grow love. And if you want to understand growing love, if you can't like easily grok it, you know what I mean, I would say read Rumi, or read Hafiz, or, you know, read Khalil Gibran. These are three people who have written about love in the most beautiful of ways. That might give you some insight into how I think about love, and you can then begin to develop your own thoughts about it.
Everything you just said makes so much sense to me, and my summary of it is anybody that, especially when you mention these authors who I've been reading all week long and in the middle of the Pacific Ocean here on my break, but they got nature.
Mm-hmm.
They got nature.
Mm-hmm.
And love, which are inseparable and chaotic and always changing, and the growth concept. And anyway, so relationships and spirituality, we've just talked a lot about what we didn't talk about, which is the part that gets us all in trouble. And we'll talk about another time, is when we let relationships become a distraction to our growth instead of feeding our growth. But
I think one of the things, Heather, is the reason that we live in spiritual community, and the reason people, human beings, have lived in spiritual community since the beginning of time, is because relationships are important, and community provides a context in which spiritual people can sustain meaningful relationships without sacrificing their commitment to growing.
thank you for helping me do that.
You're welcome, dear.
So wherever you all are in your dance with relationships and your spiritual practice, I hope you got something out of our talk today. This is truly News from the Heart with Swami Chetanananda.
Great.
Thank you.